Hi everyone and welcome to our new video. In this video we are going to continue ahead. This is the second part of the video. In the previous one, we discussed about the DOS and the DDoS attacks and how we can basically explain you how the DDoS attack basically happens in an environment. Now we talked about that AWS provides you a WAF solution, which basically allows you to implement the WebACL and which has a rate rule based logic which you can implement to prevent the DOS attack. Let's understand how this basically fits into the infrastructure and how you can make the best use of it. Now, because this is our targeted servers and the traffic is coming through the internet, what you can do is you can have a WAF in before your internet, and you can also have a CDN. So suppose I'm having two additional layers of, suppose I have initially, this is my first layer, okay? And I can have one more layer like this. And let's now try and understand how this layer works. So this is our CloudFront, which is a CDN. And now basically because you are using the CloudFront, so you can distribute the traffic, you can serve the static files directly from the CloudFront, and you can do the caching. You will have edge servers, so the bandwidth kind of attacks which happens, you can distribute it to your CDN, use down the intensity of the cloud attacks. Now this is something which everyone does, and they have CloudFront or some other CDN like Akamai or some implemented, which basically helps you to divert the traffic away from it. Cloudflare is the another one. Now this is where the CloudFront comes into the picture, and then we have what is like a WAF. Now WAF is a web application firewall, which is a built-in solution like provided by the AWS cloud. Okay, and this web application firewall, as we say to it, this is really helpful in preventing the WAF attack. Now this basically, when we talk about the rule-based algorithm, this is implemented like under the WAF only, and this rule-based rate rule-based, what basically rate rule-based does is it limits down. Okay, this basically limits the rate of request. Okay, it limits the rate of request. What this means is that rate of requests which are coming to your web server or your mobile application. Now what this limit rate of request basically means, so whenever you receive a request, it would be having an originating IP address, which basically triggers some action on the basis of which it's going to limit the number of requests which a particular IP can generate. So suppose if I count this request on the basis, first of all, you need to understand that it is determining this rate on the request being originating. So it's originating from an IP. This might be the public IP of the attacker. This is something which you have access to, and then what it does is it looks these IPs over a period of 5 minutes. Now, all this is managed service, so you don't have to worry about it. You just need to understand how this works. So basically, over 5 minutes, it's going to aggregate the number of requests which is being received. Now, you can use this rule to put a temporary block on the request on an IP that is sending the excessive request. So suppose that if a particular IP is sending more than a threshold, suppose I set a threshold of like it can send up to 5,000 requests. So if more number of requests are sent by a particular IP, then it will get temporary block. Now when a temporary block occurs, then what will happen is, like, suppose we are getting from this IP, right? Let's say this is IP1. So temporarily this IP1 get blocked. So this server will be blocked from sending the request because it is trying to send too many requests. Now because the server gets blocked on a temporary basis, the number of requests will be reduced from these servers. Now this is happening for all the servers individually. Now, what happens is that AWS WAF can aggregate the request on the basis of IP request, which it gets from the web request. This is something which you can get directly, or you can also track the IP from the HTTP headers, like X forwarded for. So those people who are working on the web server, they will have the understanding about the X forwarded for, which basically provides you the end user IP. And uh, this is how also you can track the originating, where the request is originating. So request is actually originating from this, and you are able to get the IP of that user. Now, AWS WAF tracks and manages the web request separately for each instance based on the rule base that you are going to use. So for let's if you consider an example, so suppose if you are having a same root base settings for two different ACL, and suppose I have implemented this two ACLs, I have two web ACLs, then each of the rule represents a separate instance, and root based rules gets its own tracking and management through the AWS WAF. Now, if you define a rate based rule inside a rule group and then use that rule group in multiple places, each one is used to create a separate instance of rule based rule that gets its own tracking and management within the AWS WAF. Now, whenever the rule action triggers, the AWS WAF applies the action, and it will be applied to the IP address until this rate. So suppose initially what happened, that it was like the when we check the rate, okay, the rate at which the request was being received from an IP, suppose it was greater than 5,000. Okay, so this is something which was initially happening. Okay, that the rate was greater than 5,000, so a temporary block was placed on it. Now, what is going to happen is that once you place the block, obviously the server might be able to detect it. If it is not able to detect it, that's the best way, because then it will remain in the block state. But if it is able to detect, and then it will reduce the number of requests that will be sent, right? Because the failures will be there. So it will, unless this rate basically falls and it becomes less than that of the 5,000, the rule that you have put. Now you can be more aggressive and put a smaller number. That depends upon the traffic that you are using on your website. This is something which you can determine from your load testing, and have a general understanding how your how many requests a user can make, and what is expected before your server starts behaving inappropriately. Now, it can take a minute or two to get into the action once you put this into effect. And you can retrieve the list of IP addresses which are blocked due to the rate limiting. Now, this is very important because suppose if we are blacklisting, right? So we need to have understanding like what all IPs were blacklisted, because if suppose some user later came to us and saying that he was a genuine user, or might be he don't know, but from his server we are receiving this many requests, so he came to us saying that he is not able to access our application. He might be a third-party vendor or a direct user for our business. Okay, so we should be able to verify this, and we have a blacklisted, which is the IPs which it has basically retrieve for blocking. It will be available to you, and you can list those IPs from the rule-based rules. So this is, you can basically retrieve this blacklisted IPs from the rule base. So you can retrieve this, so you have a greater control, and you have the insights basically on which IPs the rule based has worked. And you can also check through this, you can rate this out, and you can also put a, if you are seeing that some IPs are getting very frequent, you can permanently block them if this is something which is like affecting your systems, right? This is more on a proactive basis. You are putting some rules and you have the confirmation now, and you are permanently blacklisting them. This is again something which is going to help you to reduce such kind of attacks in the future and improve the availability. Now, AWS, when you place a rate-based rule over the AWS WAF, it can have some caveats as well. So AWS WAF basically checks the request every 30 seconds and count the requests at 5 minutes each time. Because of this, it's possible that the IP address to send requests at too high rate of 30 seconds before AWS WAF detects and blocks it. So basically this means is that it is checking at every 30 seconds, right, for the IPs which are sending. Now it can be possible that because it has a time period of 30 seconds, right, because you have to put some limit where you are going to put a certain threshold. So if you are having such kind of limit, so basically over the period of 30 seconds, it is possible that your attacker might already send too many requests. Right now, this is one of the key hits. So suppose the attack vector is very big, right? So it is going to look for 30 seconds. It's going to determine the IPs and the rate at which those IPs are getting the request. But if the attack vector is even higher than that, then within the period of 30 seconds, you might already receive the too many requests. Now, this is one of the key hits. Another one can be that AWS WAF can block up to 10,000 IP address. So suppose the number of servers which you are looking here, right? So this is suppose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So the botnet, like the number of bots inside this network that you are seeing is 6. Now suppose if this is something very big, right? So suppose this is somewhere around like suppose 50,000, right? This is a very big network of bots which is attacking your system now. So what AWS says is that it is able to right now block, so out of this 50, suppose all 50,000 are attacking, but it will be able to block something like 10,000. Now 10,000 itself is a massive number. Don't underestimate this, because this is someone else computer and network, right? So this is someone else a network, and they are controlling 10,000 network just to cause an attack on your machine, right? So AWS will be able to block this many requests, but out of if there are more number of bots which are attacking, right, they will not block further to it. So the attack might continue if more number of servers are attacking. Then the other rate limitations, like your API gateway, your API limits, if you have further put the limits inside your API, those thresholds will also be coming into the picture. That will additionally provide the blocking. But at the WAF layer, you can at least consider this, that at least the 10,000 requests the WAF would be able to put inside the blacklist. Okay, so you can narrow down the scope of the request using the AWS WAF tracks and count. To do this, you nest to another, right? So the scope of the statement inside the rate-based statement, and AWS WAF is only count the request that matches the scope down statement. So what this means is that if I want to increase this limit, right, if you are not happy with this 10,000 limit, you can use the nested statement, right? So this is another thing that you can implement. You can directly implement the nested statement. Now, if I'm implementing the nested statement, that will be limiting the rules at a level, right? So if I'm putting one under another ACL, then it will increase this limit to even beyond. Okay, so suppose for example, if the request you are making an attacker which is in the United States, and you want to create a rate-based rule, you can narrow down the scope in a way that you can put an AND rule in the statement that contains the second level of nested statement. What this means is like a geo match of the statement that specifies that the request which is originating in the United States and which matches to a user agent. Suppose the user agent comes with a bad bot, right? So if you combine both of them, that if a geo match is of the specific which is requesting in the United States, and the string matches to the search like user agent header is matching to the bad bot. Okay, so let's say you have set a rate limit of 1,000 for each IPs, then AWS WAF counts the request and meet both the conditions. So requests that don't meet those conditions aren't counted. If the count of the IP address exceeds 1000 requests in 5 minutes, the rule action triggers on the IP address. So this is just like one of the example in which we are basically checking the two things, like a geo match should occur. Okay, suppose it's originating, it can be, and then the second one is like tagged as bad bot. Will only target with a combination of these, just a region or an IP, which basically helps you target, right? So out of that, it will, and once you have like once both of them are request breaches 1000 by this giving abnormally, there's a, in those cases the AWS, this is a confirmation for it to that. Now another example, this is right. So this is example one. I think this is simple in this case. So another request component. So suppose type, it starts with a string, and it's a, we are matching the three things here. Then we narrow down the scope of it, like the statements that we can put. We essentially see that if we introduce, we are able to put a limit, considerably reduce the attack vector. Checking for a breach, okay, checking for a, which is breaching our conditions. Now we can, or the individual IPs, which is a very basic. So you can actually combine for determining the threat. You can it can blacklist, the request will be stopped, right? Now the blacklist is very attack or too much request is false below threat, if it falls below it, okay, and this will thing which AWS is taking care for you, right? So automatically increase your time, okay, then it allows to list. So again, that is something which will help you and get the IPs, and there you talk if someone reaches out. So when you blacklist, you have a limit of 10,000. These are few of the limitations which it poses. Threshold over a period of the limitation, but then these are, attack is so big, so you would you will have to create an infrastructure which is redundant, make this DDoS attack fail, has gone to a great length to do such attack. That over it's not only that once we put WAF, it's a complete, so it will be happened by our API gateway, it will be happen things which are available in AWS. Like once you have this rate based on WAF is a great can, and you must, okay, this is downside to it, right? So over a period of time, you got banned, and this is how you can actually determine on your web server how to understand these kind of vectors, because the thing and that we are kind of under the attacks, not consider it right now, but eventually proactive on this. And if you reduce some blocked, then it's an indication. Also plan and manage your infrastructure by putting them. This is all that I wanted to discuss about this. Do subscribe to our channel for more. Thank you everyone. That's all for this